Everybody, welcome to the N Word for Nerds, your Heard podcast. The Heard part is just something I just do in there right now.
You heard it now.
Right. As always, let's start off with the hard work, the heavy lifting. Remember to like, share, subscribe, hit the bell icon to be notified when we are up and streaming, be notified for all our other content, as well as the N Word for Nerd podcast. We just dropped some new stuff, which is we did the Titans season 3. Me and the Duke of Nerds did that conversation. You can enjoy that. That should be up by the time you're probably viewing this. And we also just put out a small little taste of snippets of us talking about Patman, Robert
Patman. That's what we decided on, Patman.
Yeah, yes. So check those all out on the Headcanon Circus. And again, we're everywhere: YouTube, Facebook, streaming, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. Just again, remember, if you just subscribe and hit the bell, you don't have to worry about where we are because it will notify you. It just tell you. It'll be easy. All right, let's go on to the show. Starting off with, we always got to start with the affirmative action hire first. So, Token Jaren, how's it going?
What's happening? Glad to be here. Feeling a lot better than yesterday.
Yes, we had a long night. I was going to weekend, but it was just one night, and yeah, showed our age. Jason, Duke of all Nerds, how's it going, my friend?
I guess we're not supposed to say what day it is. It's Monday today, and everybody hates Monday.
Yeah. I mean, whoever's listening to this hates Monday as much as we do, or as much as Garfield does. Either or.
Worst day of the week.
Worst day of the week. Okay, well, now that we have that out the way, let's jump right into play. All right, well, we are going to jump into our last topic of the day, and I'm so excited to be able to mediate this because I'm going to enjoy this moment.
You're the part of this. You don't need to mediate this. It's going to be us versus them.
Yeah, I know. I might have an opinion, but I also have to be a host as well. So I can't just like fully forget my role. But anyway, if anybody watched last week's show, which we know you did because you're watching this week, and kudos to you. Remember to like, share, and subscribe.
Thank you, Mom.
Thank you. Yes. Jared, we had made a comment, and I said, hey, yeah, we all agree that Lord of the Rings is the best fantasy franchise, right? And Jason's like, yeah. Duke was like, yeah, that's easy work. That's light work. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. But it was quiet in the other box. And the other box decided to say, I don't think he didn't say it was not. I think he just said that he preferred Harry Potter as a just off the top of the dome throw out without any work or research. He was like, oh, no, I probably enjoyed the Harry Potter series more than that.
Which is a good pick. Good pick.
Yeah. So I said, well, you know what? We got to bring it to the table. We got to talk about Lord of the Rings. Why and why not is that the greatest fantasy franchise or set of movies of all time. And so naturally, Jason number A, switch my hands. He's on one side of that arena. Jaren's on the other side of that arena. I'm probably more close. I'm really closer to Jason number A in that thought process. But I would like to have a little debate about it, why we feel that it is, and then have Jaren shred all of our reasons to shreds, and then we can wrap up this video. So or podcast. So Jason number A, please explain to us the reasons why Lord of the Rings is the best fantasy franchise of all time.
Well, let's just call, as Jason always says, let's call a spade a spade. It's the archetype of all fantasy. Like it is the basis for anybody past 1935, since that book has come out, since Hobbit has come out, has been trying to emulate in some form or fashion the amount of success that Lord of the Rings did. In some form or fashion. They're taking either some sort of trope or some sort of piece of Lord of the Rings and trying to put their own spin on it. Period. That's just the way the fantasy genre is. Everything has been just a commentary of Lord of the Rings. And when you're that big, there was really no fantasy genre before Lord of the Rings. Beforehand, it was literally just fairy tales, like Brothers Grimm, shit for kids. And then there's Lord of the Rings, and then there's everything else. Like from Game of Thrones to Wheel of Time to Harry Potter, everything else came after Lord of the Rings. And we're talking about world building in scope. The 3 books of Lord of the Rings and the 1 book of The Hobbit is a slice of what Tolkien wrote down. It is a piece of what he had in his head. Like we have gotten pretty much everything else, but there is so much going on in this universe that like I can only say that pretty much only one other sort of sci-fi or fantasy series even come even close, and that's Dune, because that's 40,000 or 100,000 years of shit. And that's about it. Like nothing else comes even close to the amount of love and craft and just simple, like from the beginning of time to even he had plans for 400 500 years after the Lord of the Rings, all that stuff in between. It's just like no one has that kind of time anymore. Yeah, damn it, he had another job and he still did that shit. Like no one just has that time anymore. So it's just the whole breadth of that whole entire universe is everybody's been chasing after that. And some people succeed to get there, and some people just only get a bare slither of it, but they're chasing after the goat. It's like, you might be better, you might be LeBron James, but you ain't never going to be as a Michael Jordan. I'm just saying.
Oh wow, that's a layered hot take there. Oh wow. And then I'll jump in and I'll keep my critique closer, directly to the movies. As far as the movie franchise goes, we're just going out Lord of the Rings, not including The Hobbit, just those 3 movies, Fellowship,
No, you should definitely
Towers.
include all of it. You should definitely include all of it.
No, you shouldn't.
No. I guess that's why I made sure I said Lord of the Rings. Well, I said, I did
because they're 2 different
Lord
series.
Of the Rings. Yeah, it's 2, like Lord of
same
the Rings.
Same author, same time period, same characters. Fuck off.
2 different series. That's like saying
different stories.
They're 2 different series. That's like saying the Cursed Child and Harry Potter should all be concluded. We're not including the Cursed
Child. It's like saying Harry Potter or
the Fantastic Beasts.
Yeah, which I would include.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Nah,
I would not include that.
I include Lord of the Rings as its own separate thing when we're talking about the greatest franchises. It is not considering The Hobbit on it, but granted, there's some crossover there. But so does the other things we're going to mention here. But speaking just directly to the movies, and let's be completely honest, when it finished with Return of the King, we didn't know a Hobbit movie was ever going to be made. Like that was it. Speaking to the movies, I mean, the scope of how lived in that world feels from the movies is something that every person who makes film wants their movies to feel like. They want to feel like when you watch these movies, you are inserting yourself or viewing this world that is completely believable, maybe in another universe, but can happen. The fact that they're able to accomplish that almost seamlessly, because I guess some people will make an argument if you're from New Zealand, when they do the pull-out pan shots,
you're like, oh, I
know where that is. Yeah, but if you're not from New Zealand or you haven't visited it, you don't know. To you, that's Middle Earth. That's there. Like, that's no New Zealand at all.
Same thing with Game of Thrones in Ireland.
Yeah. Right. The ability and the time to make sure that every thing that was going to be put in this was almost took like the imagination of millions of people, and you put it on screen and you hit the mark. It is very rare in the franchise that no one has a complaint about the characterizations, how they spoke, how they acted, the pronunciation of people's names. M. Night. Like no one has a critique of Lord of the Rings in any of those moments because it hits spot on. Even if we wanted to bring up Harry Potter, people sometimes talk about
there were some weak ones.
Well, not even just that, but even the characterization of Hermione versus the books versus how she was portrayed in the movie, how of her activism and all that was portrayed and not left into the movies. Like it's even people that complain about Harry Potter's that the characterization even of Harry, it never came across that Harry's biggest strength was his courage and his determination. Never came across as great in the movies as it did in the books. I know me and you, Jared, talked about things in the books like Goblet of Fire, Cedric's death. Means nothing if you only watch the movies, but if you know the books, that's the only reason you care about it in the movies. So you actually need the books to make Harry Potter feel more lived in. Where with Tolkien, I'll be real with you. I'll be completely honest with you. I had never read Tolkien until after I saw Fellowship. And the movie made me want to go read the books because I was like, oh my God, how is this a book series that I've never heard of it? And this is dope. And I realized that when I talked around in the diaspora, it was a lot of people that were like me that saw the first movie and it intrigued them so much that we went and saw it. And then you do the research on Tolkien, which Jason kind of really laid out beautifully that Tolkien was the OG of this. That's why I felt it. But going to Peter Jackson's ability to basically make and build this movie in such a way that all the fandom was pleased with it. But even besides being pleased with it, you actually built the characters. And I know Aragorn's journey is a little different in the books than it is in the movie. But all the moves that you make to change it to make it more streamlined, it works. It fits the characterizations. When this movie ends, and I know at this point you've spent almost an eternity. I mean, what is it? 3.5, 3.5, 3.5. You spent your whole life in here, almost 12 hours watching these movies, these 3 movies. You do feel like you lose something. Like you do feel like you're parting from friends. You do feel like you're parting from a journey that you took with those characters on screen. Again, these are hard things to roll up into people. And again, this is a guy who, I wasn't a fandom freak of this. I became a fandom freak after the movies ended. It was like, I haven't been able even to match that feeling in any other franchise where I left feeling like I had joined a journey with somebody. Maybe sitting in the movie theater, bumping knees with somebody for 3.5 hours will do that to you. But leaving the theater, all of us were talking like we were all buddies. Like we had took this journey and got the ring into the volcano. We're like, yes, we did it. Like, high five. Oh, are you going to see the next showing? Nah, it's kind of late. But all right, maybe I will. But again, it was just a different vibe. So for me, why I say it's the best fantasy movie series of all time is because it's things here that I just think you don't get in any other fantasy. I think Dune is close, but the movie was terrible. I think Harry Potter's close, but if you read the books, you realize that so much left on the table that's intricate to those characters that doesn't get fleshed out. Even when I was thinking about it, I was thinking about other just fantasy genre type of stuff. I mean, Never Ending Story as a kid gives you the feels. Part 1, not part 2. Gives you the
I love part
feels.
2. Poor Jonathan
Oh,
Randis, what his name is, he's dead.
All right. If you do, Wizard of Oz, even Return of Oz, which is freaky and weird, but it's still kind of awesome. But none of it ever felt the way Lord of the Rings felt, because Lord of the Rings didn't feel like a movie. It felt like an adventure. And that is a very hard to do, because that's what movies are supposed to feel like. Movies are supposed to take you on a ride and on an adventure. And especially when you have movies that are 3.5 hours, for me to sit through there and not be bored or not be feeling like I got to check my watch, that's an impressive feat, because most times people are like, all right, man, wrap it up, B. Wrap it up. So
I will tell you that the characterization of Merry and Pippin in the movies is a little bit more humorous than in the books, because Merry and Pippin in the books are straight badasses. They are straight murderers in the books.
Right. But they even do that because again, I think all of the Hobbits' biggest journey, especially for Merry and Pippin, is they have to leave the childish stuff alone. They don't even get the magnitude of what's going on until Return of the King for most of the journey. That's why they have dumb conversations in trees, and it's like everybody's like, well, why do they have these conversations? It's just stupid. I'm like, because they're trying to show you that these hobbits still do not get the magnitude of the danger.
Because they've only lived in the Shire for the past 1,000 years, and they've never known anything. They would only send like 40 people to wars, and that's it. Here you go, bye. Yeah. When the king needed them. But all right,
Absolutely.
Sorry, Jared, you can go on and
all right, Jared, go ahead. Let's shred us up, man, and we can take this home.
So as I understand it, Jason number A, your argument for it is that it's foundational. It was the first. And Jason number 1, your argument is that it's incredibly long. Is that what I'm getting?
No, my argument is that it's a masterclass in filmmaking, because it's able to do things that all filmmakers want to do.
Because it told the story long form.
Yeah, but in an entertaining way.
About how long,
because you don't feel like it's been long. It's not.
I'm not going to take his time. If that's what he wants to say, continue. Go ahead.
I don't really have any great arguments against that. It is long, and it was first. I prefer movies that tell a story that's more streamlined, and I think that we often, as a group, harp on movies for being paced poorly. And you guys are talking about some of the most long, drawn out, ill-paced movies in the history of cinema. And then they release an even longer version of them for home consumption.
Which is even better.
And you guys are like, this is my jam.
Yeah.
So as far as fantasy tropes go, I mean, honestly, I really can't give you a great argument why Lord of the Rings, as far as movies go, isn't, if not the best, then top 2. Okay. I still have a lot of love for the Harry Potter series. I read the books before I read or watched the movies, or I read the books along with it, I guess. Because they were kind of, did they piggyback? I feel like at some point
they were kind of like, after like the first 3, it was kind of like they're releasing the book
coming out every year.
The movie,
where
they're releasing the next book with the previous movie.
Right. And I was talking to Jason about this. For me, the greatest fantasy series of all time is still just in book form, and it's the Discworld series. But
I was going to mention that as one of those people that have come close to that same scope.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, talk about world building.
Yeah,
that is and the thing is that it wasn't world building in an exhaustive additional text called the Silmarillion or whatever it's called. It was
That's
world
great.
building. It was world building in that tertiary characters in the first two novels became main characters in the subsequent novels, and then tertiary characters from those novels became main characters in novels that followed. So you always rubbed shoulders with somebody who had something interesting to impart or help along in your journey in a previous book, who then was the star of the next book, and then you got to experience a much more detailed version of their world, and that's how he built the world out with them. But I won't harp on it too long. If you guys like novels and you like fantasy and you also like what Jason was talking about earlier with me, kind of sharp, witty, almost sarcastic humor and something that's just like the sharpest of wit, the Discworld series is something you shouldn't sleep on. It's fantastic. But yeah.
Have they made a movie yet?
No, they had a video game in the late 90s. That was completely obtuse to play.
Yeah, they made some TV shows that were basically like multi small like European versions of series where they're only like 6 episodes and they span the books. And they were made by the BBC. The visual effects they're trash. Ironically, Sam from The Lord of the Rings is one of the main characters in it though. So
Sean Astin,
yeah.
I think with Discworld, especially with like pretty much any other like large fantasy work, in order to do it well, you're gonna need somebody who is a massive fan who's also really good at what they do. Like that's the reason why, as a whole, as those first 3 movies of Lord of the Rings are so good, is because Peter Jackson's a massive fan and he loves what he does.
Yeah.
The reasons like the Harry Potter movies fail for me is because you got good directors, doing the movies.
Yeah,
but like especially with Prisoner Azkaban, fucking Alphonse Cuarón, who is a phenomenal director, is like, fuck the book. I don't even give a a let's do what we're going to do.
Yeah. Actually, that's my favorite movie out of it because it looks and feels the best.
Yeah,
it looks and feels the best out of all the movies.
Yeah,
you're right. He doesn't give a damn about the book when he makes the movie. Like,
yeah, he's like, I don't need to read no books. What is this source material? Who gives a shit? I'm here to make movies.
I think
I don't know why he has that accent. He's definitely like Hispanic.
Yeah.
He's definitely
Based on your description of how you felt coming out of the movies, Jason, the only time I've ever felt anything close to that in movies was throughout the Marvel journey. Like when we got to Endgame after going to see all 10 years of these movies with mostly the same people, I mean, that felt like the end of a journey too. So
yeah, superhero movies are technically fantasy as well, I suppose.
I mean, yeah. But as far as just that feeling of like coming out of like, remember when we were much younger and we watched Iron Man 1 and now here we are,
when we're adults.
Yeah. So again, I looked long and hard and I did some research, and honestly, ultimately I'm not going to put too much resistance up against it being the best movie adapted like the best series that's been adapted for movies that is fantasy. There isn't currently one out there that beats Lord of the Rings for that. So I thought about it. Harry Potter, if it had had a consistent director and a consistent kind of like vibe through the whole thing, I think Harry Potter would have definitely given a run for its money. If not maybe gone a little further. But because it was just constantly being handed off to other people and people that cared about the subject matter, people didn't, it falters in that regard. When you have a singular vision and a talented vision at that, not to mention
Star Wars.
not to mention you create Weta, Weta's in your back pocket.
Yeah.
You're gonna put out gold. I just wish there was less walking in it. That's all.
I think what hampered Harry Potter the most, besides J.K. Rowling being a turf,
horrible,
was the fact that they had to deal with children, and children are going to grow every year, and you're basically, even though Lord of the Rings was shot in 3 years back to back, they weren't rushing because everybody's an adult, everybody's going to pretty much look the same no matter what from year to year, whereas in Harry Potter they pretty much had to rush through each one of these movies to get these shot before Ron started his voice started to crack and he started looking like the man. In the third movie, when he's supposed to be 13, but he looked like he's 75. You know, so they had to get it like, oh, we got to get this going, and like so they had to make some shortcuts and stuff because they had to deal with children.
Yeah,
but beyond that, and the fact that J.K. Rowling's a terrible human being, that's only like criticism I can make of that.
Yeah.
Well, and let's be real, like when we talk about the Lord of the Rings movies, we got to put a lot in perspective too. That's why it's going to be hard to beat. Like, let's see how this new Dune goes and then see if it spawns out to further. But you got to realize that how many times did they try Lord of the Rings in cartoon form and different incarnations and it did not work?
Because it was always so big.
Yeah. Ralph Belinsky tried to do like the first 2 books in one movie. It's like,
right.
Yeah.
So like you almost had so many failures to say, okay, that didn't work, that didn't work, that didn't work, that did work, keep that did work, keep that. And then, like you said, you knew going into this, the fan base was already set. So you had the studio's money already lined up to want to do this.
Yeah.
And then they allowed you to basically, I say write a blank check, but almost write a blank check to give you like, hey, whatever's going to make this look the best it possibly can look.
Yeah.
Let's transpose that to, because the closest thing we're talking about is to Harry Potter. The first two Harry Potter suffered from that fact because they didn't know if it was going to be successful. Like, they didn't have a clue. Like, those first 2 don't look as good as when it gets further on and you see the studio money behind it. Because let's be real, they were like, hey, this could work, but these YA novels don't always do as well. So let's take our they hedged their bets on it. So that's always going to hurt it too, is because Lord of the Rings started with that big ass budget, and it was like, hey, take as much time as you want, do this, make it look beautiful. I mean, hell, you could put on Lord of the Rings now, and it still pretty much holds up to what goes on today. I mean, pretty much
it's been like 10 years.
Yeah, probably longer than that from the first one. Oh, yeah. So I mean, Golem is still
the best.
It still holds up. Standards now of
a digital character.
Yeah, it's going to be hard for any other fantasy.
What's his face still gets jobs off of his role as Golem.
Oh,
they still be fucking casting this dude.
Andy Circus or whatever.
Andy Circus, they still be casting this dude off his role as Golem, man.
Yeah, and so like it's going to be hard for any other fantasy to come in with that because they got to have deep pockets. 1, they got to know the fan base is going to be wanting to see it. 2, and then 3, you got to have somebody like you said with the passion, desire, and the mindset to make it work. Let's be real. Doing 3 years on a movie as a director. I mean, as you guys who have been in film, you guys know. Being in it for months is nerve-wracking. Can you imagine doing 3 years and having to keep that same focus and dedication?
At least it's a job.
Yes, true. But
you're like, oh, I got 3 years of this shit. This is going to be terrible, but at least I got 3 years of work.
That's true. That's true. But just the focus that would take for doing this day after day after day after day, So, again, it's going to be hard for anything to match that ability that movie put out. Which you can obviously see is hard to do because we can go and say, look at The Hobbit.
Yeah.
And you go, this is a train wreck. How can something be worse?
They split a book they split a book that's shorter than the first one, and they tried to make 3 movies out of it. It's like, what the fuck?
Right. So it's just going to be hard to top that, man.
I get it. And I guess my initial reaction last week when this all came up was, so I went and I saw them day one, right? And I did it. I watched the movies, but there was nothing. I've never watched the long form versions of them. There was nothing that really drew me back into it. And to this day, if you were to tell me, hey, let's sit down and watch a 3 movie franchise that's set in a fantasy world, I'd rather pick out a different franchise than that. I mean, I've seen it. I'm good. I don't need to see it again. I'd rather watch How to Train Your Dragon 1, 2, and 3 than watch Lord of the Rings again.
I will always come back to Two Towers. Fucking the Battle of Helm's Deep is
amazing.
Fucking
amazing.
One of the best battles on fucking cinema of all time.
Yeah, I actually enjoy that more than Return of the King. Like Battle of Helm's Deep is my probably favorite like battle thing of all movie history. Like I don't think of anything else that I've seen that has the moments in it that has. Like I think it's just amazing.
Is that the one where the Mad King is losing his shit?
No, that's in Return.
That's Game of Thrones, man.
Well, and that too. That is works. Yes.
No,
But yeah,
the
it's
Mad
funny
King
too.
from Star Trek.
Yeah, you know when Gandalf came to Luke Skywalker and told him to get the Enterprise.
Yeah. And he's got to get it up to 88 so he can go back in time.
Yeah, and you know, and the Doctor Who was saying, "Oh, I'm a doctor, not a scientist, Bones." Or
so I figure we'd do this really quick before we end the show. I'm going to bring up things that people hate about Lord of the Rings and have Jason respond to it very briefly.
It's all going to be "You're an idiot. Stop talking about it."
Right. One, first, the number one complaint on all the internet world: how come the Eagles didn't just fly into the volcano and drop the ring off?
Because the Eagles are their own people. They're not fucking a taxi service. They had their own shit they were concerned about they were doing. And also, fucking Sauron has a fucking air force. They would have spotted them and killed them all. All right. That's why. Their whole thing was subterfuge. That's the reason why they got in there, because they snuck there. Okay. One does not simply just fly into Mordor.
Yes.
And also the Eagles are like, Gandalf, because Eagles are like Gandalf, you owe me one. I owe you one.
To say, yeah. Yes, they owe
and
Gandalf
that's it.
Favor.
And then he saved Gandalf and it's like, that's it. You got one more and I'm fucking done.
Yep.
We got our own shit to deal with.
So yes, people go, well, the next one people will say, well, if the elves are so strong and Legolas was able to take out all the, why did you just got an army of elves and they could have just took down the whole thing?
Well, also with that, there's also another character called I want to say it's Glendorfin, who is one of the most powerful beings on Middle Earth. He's the one that actually ends up saving Frodo from the ring wraiths in the beginning of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
But he is so powerful that Sauron would have completely saw him. So if there was an army of elves, Sauron would completely have seen it because he can see elves. He would have seen them coming, and he would have put his whole entire will and might towards defeating them. The reason why Frodo was able to get to Mordor is because Sauron was distracted by fucking Aragorn and all the other shit that was going on. He wasn't looking for Frodo. That's why. And if you have an army of elves, they barely won the last time 3,000 years ago.
Absolutely. And also elves really don't have children. So them going into that battle literally would have wiped out their whole population in one fight. So the next one we always get for Lord of the Rings people is, well, how come when Gandalf was Gandalf the Grey, he sucked, but then he came back as white and he was ultra powerful? When all the wizards just die and come back all powerful. Because
Gandalf was sent back because his purpose wasn't done yet. Not everybody gets back. In fact, he's the second person. The first person I was talking about, I'm pretty sure I'm getting his name wrong, was the only other person in the history of Middle Earth sent back was Glendorfil, and then the other one was Gandalf because they were so badass in what they did. The Maiar and the gods, the Valar, were like, okay, you go back because you're not done. You get a second chance. Any other wizard, fucking Radagast the Brown would have just been dead. And the blue ones, we don't even know what the fuck happened to them. And Sauron betrayed his goal. So that's why Gandalf was not as good, because he was meant not to be as good, and then he died and he came back.
Right. The last one I have that I actually do not know the answer to. So if you know this answer, great. If you don't, we have to look it up for the next show. Last one I had is, well, where Sauron's rings was so powerful, how come all the other rings they made didn't have as much power as that one, or even all their rings combined couldn't have been as powerful as his ring?
All those rings were corrupted by him. So all those rings were his way. That's why he has the one ring, was that he could influence all the other rings except for the Elvish ones, because the Elvish ones, they realized what he was doing as he created the one ring and hid their power from him. So those rings aren't as powerful as the one ring, and if they were using them, he would be able to corrupt those as well. So pretty much any other rings, from the Dwarven rings, the 9 Dwarven rings, even to the 7 Dwarven rings, and the 9 men rings, he corrupted all of them. That's why they have ring wraiths. They were all corrupted. So those 3 Elven rings were basically just used to do small things so that Sauron couldn't corrupt them, and that's why they couldn't use them against him. And that's it. And Right. He made them. He made those rings. You don't want to use the shit that the guy wants you to use against him.
He's like, hey, you're my girl. Have that ring. Hey, you're my girl. Have this ring. Hey, hey, where's my dinner at? I didn't make no dinner. It's corruption. Oh yeah, right here. Here, my loving husband. But yes, that's why I went through the online and picked up like the ones that I saw the common. Oh, Lord of the Rings sucks because why didn't they do this? And I just picked out those. So that's what that was. Little exercise in that. Plus, I thought Jaron would probably bring up some of them, so I was already prepared for the tomfoolery.
Which is what's so great about the Lord of the Rings is like, even though we saw the movies and like, okay, why didn't they use the eagles? Fucking Tolkien had to answer that like well before we saw it. Like he had to answer for all this shit because he wrote it all. He wrote 5,000 years worth of lore. The reason why this shit can't happen, right?
Yeah,
and like most fucking fantasy authors don't have that kind of time to write 5,000 years of lore out. There's still some,
they're not writing a book at the time. They're just
because they're not writing
the lore out. Yeah.
Yeah, George Martin is probably one of the few who has that kind of time because he's like, I want to take 10 years to write a book. Fuck you guys.
yeah. He'll die before he finishes that series. So I'm just saying that now.
I think the last 2 books already written.
This show home, guys. Thank you as always. Listen to the N-Word for Nerd podcast. Hopefully, what you listened to today you enjoyed, or if you thought it was just trash, tell us that it was trash and why our opinions.
We'll tell you to suck our dicks.
I know. Tell Jason to start being a lot easier and nicer to Jaron. Oh yeah, this Jason, not that Jason, whichever one you point to.
We agree to disagree.
Right. So if you have comments, thoughts, please leave it on Facebook or on YouTube. And again, we're everywhere: DSP, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iTunes, wherever you listen to podcasts, we are there as well. And if you are on YouTube, again, go ahead and subscribe. Hit the bell icon to be notified when we drop. Because this new format we have, we're pretty much dropping stuff almost every single day between reviews and music and movies and culture talks about Lord of the Rings and if Batman sucks and if Tim Drake is. Oh, we'll probably say that for another one. All right, good. So, as always, sign it off here. Jaron, anything you like to say to everybody before we leave?
No, you guys have a great week, man.
All right, and Jason number A, Duke of all nerds. Anything you like to say?
Be kind, be considerate, and tip your servers and bartenders 20%. At least.
All right. At least.
You can tip them more, please. That'd be good.
And if you had a great time, tune in and we'll have more content for you.